Morning glory, evening grace, brethren and sisters. Great to have all of you back along with us here with Temperance Awakening. And I look forward to getting into our third tobacco lecture here today. And we're going to be looking at addiction to nicotine. I'm going to be going through some of the chemical things and all that happen in the body with addiction to nicotine and the psychological aspects of addiction. And as promised, it's actually not the book that I thought. I ordered myself for my own personal library another book about tobacco, but that hasn't arrived in the mail yet. It should be in a couple of days. But I do have one though, a good one, and it's actually about addiction. And you might be able to read there its opposing viewpoints of addiction. So I don't agree with everything in this book, but it is good though to look at some opposing viewpoints and see where different folks are coming from, and a good literary project there. I've already read close to about half of that book. I got it at the local library, so check out your library, or want to have a copy of your own, as I probably will eventually. Check Amazon, eBay, can probably buy that used at a at a pretty inexpensive price. So a number of different contributors there to that book, and it just isn't just about nicotine, but also talks about things like gambling, internet addiction, pornography, alcohol, drugs, painkillers, etc. And so a really good read there about like things that this ministry is all about helping people with different addictions. And so now getting into our third lecture here about tobacco in our young time here with this ministry, putting these lectures out. So a couple of these things that we're going to mention here, we've already kind of gone over before, like in our very early videos, like in the general overview video that we put out first about tobacco, alcohol, and pornography. But getting in here though, just about addiction to nicotine, keying in on a few things. Nicotine is an addicting agent found in tobacco plants. I do like one thing that I read here through some of the study that I did recently. A couple of people that I've read after and all, they made a really intriguing point. They said if tobacco was something that had been discovered, more recently than several years ago, maybe more recently like 1985 or 1990, somewhere around there, up until our present time, tobacco probably would not even have been made legal. It would have been an illegal drug, just like, heroin, cocaine, and other things, because it is both very addictive and very harmful. So it can cause a preventable death. I thought that was quite interesting there. And of course, most of those things that I read after were things put out like in the late 90s to the early 2000s. Of course, now, we actually recently had some laws at the present time of putting out this lecture, like in 2021. There is now a legal action that's been taken that are outlawing menthol, cigarettes and flavored cigars, and I think some states are even outlawing like flavored smokeless tobacco, like cherry, apple flavored, skull, like wintergreen grizzly, and things of that nature, like with chewing tobacco, and dip snuff. So actually are having some things, now that are being done here in a legal way. Because nicotine is a natural poison. Nicotine protects tobacco plants from bugs. A large enough dose of nicotine, 40 to 60 milligrams, the equivalent of a few drops, could kill a grown person. Of course, even less than that could kill a child. If a few drops of the pure poison touch mucous tissue, such as the damp skin inside the mouth or nose, the person can die, and people have actually been murdered through nicotine poisoning. For years, going all the way back to the 1940s, debate raged over whether nicotine was an addictive substance. And, some people might think that this matter was settled and resolved whenever Surgeon General C. Everett Koop, the highest medical authority in the United States, issued a report in 1988 entitled The Health Consequences of Smoking Nicotine Addiction. Yet as recently as 1994, tobacco executives claimed that nicotine was not addictive. They fought that for a long time. It's actually like the book that I ordered from my own personal library. That's what a lot of that is about. A book called Merchants of Death, about how tobacco companies try to cover up a lot of these things. But But though, kind of like around the late 90s to the early 2000s, all of these companies here, admitted that, that nicotine was addictive. Like Philip Morris, a major tobacco corporation, stated on its website that the company agrees with the overwhelming medical and scientific consensus that cigarette smoking is addictive. Can be very difficult to quit smoking, and nicotine is the major reason why people use tobacco. Whether that be cigarettes, cigars, pipe tobacco, or smokeless, like, dip, snuff, chewing tobacco, etc. That's why they just continue to do it. And I'm going to kind of look now at some numbers here. It's good to look at, like some graphs, like we had one of these last lecture. That's some numbers of people in the United States. This is about adults in the United States that were addicted to nicotine. So this does not include, like minors. But the numbers that we have here are in the millions. In 1965, there was 50.1 million of all adults that were addicted to nicotine, and that number actually held pretty steady all the way through 1988. In 1988, there were 49.4 million total, the highest being in 1980, 51.6 million. That was probably about the biggest year for tobacco. And in 1990, though, it dropped. It dropped from 49.4 million to 45.8 million. A lot of that probably because of the statement that was put out by Dr. Koop. However, that number actually rose in 91 to 46.3 million, and then rose again in 1992 to 48.6 million. And then was pretty steady. Was pretty steady all the way through, like 1997. It was 48 million. Then it dropped a bit in 1998 down to 47.2 million. And then dropped again in 1999 to 46.5 million, and then dropped a little bit in 2001 to 46.2 million people total. So there were, from 1965 to 2001, there was a 7.8 million decrease through both genders there with smoking. But there is a bit of a different trend, though, with males and females. And then, like I said, this is all nicotine, not just smoking. Because there has been, that's one thing I can say, there has been overall, as we saw there, a decrease in nicotine users. And there's actually even a bigger decrease particularly among males who smoke. However, like in the starting around the mid-90s, there was an increase, though, in males that began using smokeless tobacco. Actually, both smokeless tobacco and even like cigars and pipe tobacco. Around 1995, there was an increase in males who started like dipping, and or chewing. Then kind of more like around, the early 2000s, there was an increase in males, particularly, younger, all this being, it's mostly younger people, who began using tobacco. There was an increase, like in males, like who smoked cigars and also who smoked pipe tobacco. But with males, though, with their nicotine addiction in 1965, 26.9 million men were addicted to nicotine and 21.1 million females were addicted, so it has been more of a male thing, not by a large number, but a small number. And then let's see here. Once again, 1980. As we said, that was the biggest year for tobacco. In 1980, there were 27.5 million men who were addicted to nicotine. That was the largest number for men. It was also larger for females there at 24.1 million, but it was actually the next time this number was done in 1985, though there were 24.7 females who were addicted to nicotine. A lot of that, because of the brands that were attractive to females, like Virginia Slims and things of that nature. And then among males, there was a bit of a decrease in 1985, actually, for males. It went down to 25.7 million. And then that was number that held pretty steady through 88, and then of course in 1990 with Dr. Koop's report there was a slight decrease among males. In 1988, 25.8 million were addicted to nicotine, but then in 1990 it went down to 24.2 million. And then that was a number that that has actually stayed pretty steady, like since then, all the way down through 2001. There's actually 24.4 million males that are addicted to nicotine. As I said, there has been a decrease in cigarette smokers for males and females, especially for males. But as we said, there has been a larger number, though, like of males, like since the 90s, like you see there, that have started using smokeless tobacco and then even smoking cigars and pipe tobacco. And there was a decrease also, like for females. Like there was a 23.7 females who were addicted to nicotine in 1988. Then in 1990, that number dropped to 21.6%, but then went back up in 1991. Went up to 22.2 million, went up again in 1992 to 24 million, then had a decent drop in 1993 to 21.5 million. And then that number stayed pretty steady, like all the way until 2001, where 21.8 females are still addicted to tobacco. And just about all of these ladies here being addicted to tobacco were cigarette users, a couple of them, being snuff dippers. That was something that's, really been more so been done, by elderly ladies that dropped off, like in the 1970s. But one thing that we do see there as well is that, and it's been, proven, like in the stats and in science, we see that here just, with this graph, females have a more difficult time quitting nicotine because of how their bodies are made with the addiction and stress and everything. And so it seems to be a bit harder for females to quit smoking, than it does males. And now we're going to look at the physiological effects of nicotine. And nicotine can enter the body in several ways. It hitches a ride, so to speak, into the lungs by attaching to tar, the tiny solid particles in tobacco smoke. People who smoke pipes and cigars don't draw smoke into their lungs. Instead, those who use smokeless tobacco acquire nicotine through the mucous membranes in the mouth, that being, pipes, cigar smokers, and also chewers and dippers. Once inside the body, nicotine enters a complicated chemical communication system. The body has three basic varieties of message-bearing chemicals. The first one is cytokines. They stir up or suppress the mechanisms of the immune system to deal with evading bacteria and viruses. And then the second one being hormones. Hormones transmit messages to start or stop activity in organs or tissues, controlling blood pressure, the production of red blood cells, the amount of sugar in the blood, and regulating the salt and water balance in the body, among many other activities. And then lastly, neurotransmitters carry messages through the spaces between nerve cells or between nerve and muscle cells. And all these chemicals allow the various organs to communicate with one another and help the body as a whole to function. Neurotransmitters help messages travel along nerves. These messages may be reports of sensations, orders to muscles, information about various parts of the body, or orders to produce hormones. Whatever the message, information passes through a nerve cell as an electrical impulse. Neurotransmitters carry the message between nerve cells. The transmitting ends of the cell store as many as 10,000 tiny chemical molecules. There are about 50 different varieties depending on the message being sent. Thousands of these neurotransmitters squirt out across the space between nerve cells. The surface of the next cell is covered with molecules called receptor sites. Each receptor site accepts only one variety of neurotransmitter, just as a lock receives a key. Depending on which receptor is unlocked, a particular message is passed along. A similar lock and key system, the blood-brain barrier, is supposed to protect the brain from strange chemicals in the body. The problem, is that nicotine gets past this defense, and that's what causes the harm. Its molecular structure mimics one of the body's natural neurotransmitters. Once it's in the bloodstream, nicotine travels to the brain, binds to receptor sites there, and sets off a chain of reactions, the basic nicotine cycle. The nicotine stimulates production of the hormone epinephrine, a form of adrenaline which usually acts to put the body on alert in life or death situations. The hormone causes a surge of insulin, releasing sugar into the blood and creating a burst of energy. As the nicotine level in the body decreases, so does the sugar. The smoker feels depressed and tired and lights another cigarette. That's the basic nicotine cycle, but much more goes on in the body. Epinephrine revs up other body functions as preparation for great exertion. Both breathing and heartbeat become faster, putting stress on the lungs and heart. Blood vessels constrict, making blood pressure rise. Most importantly, nicotine activates the parts of the brain involved with pleasure. It releases the feel good neurotransmitter dopamine, like what we mentioned there in our first overview video. The same reaction that occurs when addictive drugs like cocaine or heroin enter the body, or like whenever somebody watches television, they see something funny and they laugh, that pleasure feel good thing, or, like with pornography, whenever a person, gets excited over seeing, a person nude. And the effects are different. Heroin is considered a sedative, just talking about the drugs here. It's slow, heroin slows the brain. Cocaine is a stimulant. It speeds things up. Now, depending on how much nicotine a person takes in and his or her mood at the time, the drug can act either as a stimulant or a sedative. See, that's why a lot of smokers, describe their first cigarette of the day, like whenever they wake up in the morning, as waking them up. Just like caffeine, with a cup of coffee or hot tea, or, like an energy drink. And it also explains, why a cigarette after a meal, relaxes them. We eat and have a cigarette, it relaxes you. Nicotine differs from cocaine and heroin in one important way. Most drugs, including marijuana, ecstasy, and inhalants, have an intoxicating effect. People who use such drugs become clumsy, confused, and disoriented, but nicotine doesn't have this effect. In 1996, scientists at Brookhaven Laboratory, a major nuclear research facility, used body scanning technology to discover that smokers have low levels of an enzyme called monoamine oxidase B in their brains. And this is more mostly known as MAOB for short by its initials. Enzymes trigger chemical reactions in the body, such as digesting food or breaking down body chemicals. MAOB is called the killjoy chemical because it breaks down dopamine, turning off feelings of pleasure in the brain. Something in cigarette smoke stops or inhibits MAOB. Physicians use MAOB inhibitors to treat people suffering from depression. It seems that smoking not only delivers nicotine to the body, but also prolongs the pleasurable effects of nicotine and might even have a long-term effect on a smoker's mood. The Brookhaven researchers made a further discovery in 2003. Comparing full body scans of smokers and non-smokers, they also found low levels of MAOB in the heart, liver, and kidneys of smokers. MAOB breaks down chemicals that cause high blood pressure. Since surges in blood pressure can cause crippling and even fatal strokes, this discovery points to a new health concern for smokers. Along with other recent findings, these discoveries show that there is still much more to learn about the effects smoking and nicotine have on the body. And that's why research still continues today. Besides releasing dopamine to create feelings of pleasure, are there any positive aspects connected with nicotine? Smokers find that nicotine helps them concentrate in noisy environments. It also helps control their appetite, especially the desire for sweets. Smokers often worry that if they quit smoking, they're going to gain weight. Perhaps the most important effect of nicotine on the brain is the way that it helps people handle stress. When smokers try to quit, stress becomes a big problem. Not only must they face their everyday problems, but also the additional strain of breaking a powerful habit. Then still worse, their usual way of dealing with difficulties, like with stress and all, being in a tough environment and lighting up a cigarette, is now a problem in itself. It's general knowledge that it's difficult to give up an addictive substance. But less is known about tolerance, the process in which a body, becomes used to an addictive substance. Users have to take in even larger doses of the substance to feel its effects, which is why smokers, increase their habits, from single cigarettes to a pack a day, or even more. This is what, we find like with young people, because, most smokers, begin smoking as a young age. They start off with, one or maybe a couple of cigarettes a day, but then you want more and more. You go from having one or two a day to having one or two packs a day, and sometimes even more than that for chain smokers. And that's what we're going to look at here. Because, see, nicotine has a pretty short lifespan in the body. Half the amount taken in with a cigarette is gone within 40 minutes. So then, what happens? Most smokers light up their next cigarette, and that's where, we get, chain smoking from. That's why, like with chain smokers, they smoke a cigarette once every 30 to 45 minutes. And now we're going to look at this subject here of spiking tobacco. This has been a very controversial subject over the years here. And we're going to look at this here. And given that nicotine is an addictive substance to the people who provide this drug, the tobacco companies, did they manipulate the dose to keep smokers smoking? In 1994, an ABC TV News magazine, Day One, ran several stories suggesting that tobacco companies manipulated the nicotine content of cigarettes. Philip Morris, a major tobacco company, sued the network for $10 billion. Because they were putting out that story, and Philip Morris was saying that that wasn't true. And even for a large business like ABC, a $10 billion, loss would be damaging. And in addition, at the time, the network was in the process of being sold, and the lawsuit threatened to kill the deal. Although the news division assembled considerable evidence to back its stories, ABC executives decided to settle this out of court. And the TV network apologized and paid the tobacco companies legal fees. So does that mean that cigarettes are not spiked? We got another story here. 1997, the Associated Press, an international news service, very popular, most of you are probably familiar with that, they reported on a variety of tobacco found growing in Brazil. It was called fumo louco, which means crazy tobacco. And the plants not only grow amazingly fast, but they also have much more nicotine than other tobacco plants. A 1998 follow-up story by UPI, another newswire service, reported that DNA Plant Technology Corporation, a company working for Brown and Williamson, a large tobacco company, had created this new variety of tobacco through genetic manipulation. The company pleaded guilty to illegally exporting seeds for the plants outside the United States. And so, while this question of whether tobacco companies add nicotine to the products has never officially been proven, there's a lot of evidence that suggests, that they have added nicotine to tobacco. And then if they're going to add nicotine, what else is added to it? Researchers going over tobacco company records found more than 600 ingredients added to cigarettes. Some were added for flavor, like cherry or licorice. The list included nicotine, which was described as a flavoring agent. It gives tobacco smoke its sharp burning taste. Another chemical listed as a flavoring agent, surprisingly, was ammonia. So that probably sounds strange to a lot of people. How can ammonia flavor anything? But cleaning but cleaning agents being a cleaning agent. Ammonia products are, though, actually used in baking dough, ice cream, pudding, and gravies. And researchers discovered that ammonia in cigarette smoke works with nicotine to create a form of the chemical that is more easily absorbed by the body. See, it makes nicotine go into the body even better. In 1996, a Wall Street Journal reporter revealed records from Brown and Williamson. The company's scientists had been examining a competitor's cigarettes to find out why they were so successful. And our Brown and Williamson researchers discovered ammonia technology as the process, known in the business. The brand being analyzed was Marlboro. Marlboro had experienced a huge sales rush in the 1960s, and they were the best-selling brand in the world by 1979. Was its success achieved by providing Marlboro smokers a stronger nicotine kick? Philip Morris, the company behind Marlboro, would not answer questions regarding the article, although they had earlier denied using ammonia to boost nicotine. Brown and Williamson also refused to comment on the story, claiming that its research records were a trade secret. It also denied that ammonia increased the amount of nicotine a smoker received. Scientists examining the ammonia technology called it freebasing, a process much like the one used to create a stronger dose of cocaine. Tobacco companies continue to state that they use ammonia compounds to improve the taste of cigarettes. They also dispute the results of tests conducted by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the government agency responsible for the safety of foods and medicines, about the effects of adding ammonia to cigarettes. As for references to spiking found by various various anti-smoking activist groups and researchers and company records, the tobacco companies accuse their opponents of cherry-picking, taking statements out of context from thousands of documents created over a period of 40 years. So denying a lot of these things, and as we said, that's a book that I just bought. There are a couple of books that go over like a lot of these tobacco companies denying all these things that actually are true that they do, but they just flat out lie about it. And so that's a question that won't go away. The addictive properties of nicotine and its other effects on the body turn the simple act of lighting a cigarette into a health risk, i.e., tobacco the leading cause of preventable death. Accusations that tobacco companies manipulate the amount of nicotine in cigarettes have increased that risk. And so now I'm going to look at a couple of good things here. In a moment, we're actually going to read a story about a young lady who began smoking. Question here, fact or fiction? I don't know what the big deal is. Some people say I can quit smoking at any time I want. Now, that's definitely not true. The fact is, according to statistics reported by the American Cancer Society in 2000, nearly 2/3 of teenagers, 61%, have said that they want to quit smoking. In the past year, half of these teenage smokers have tried to quit. Most of them failed, as most people do. And now a nice story here about a young lady. This is titled just a little short story here, and then we'll be done for today. It's called I Thought One Wouldn't Hurt. Lorraine, at the time when she wrote this, she was an 18-year-old high school senior. And she intends to go to college and study nursing. At the time, that's what she wanted to do. And it was the summer of her sophomore year. She had just turned 16, and she was going out with a boy who smoked. Whenever he had his pack out, he offered her, this is her talking, she said, whenever he had his pack out, he offered me a cigarette. It was something he wanted us to share. And she said, finally, I took one. I remember thinking, one can't hurt. She said, I found it so strong, couldn't even finish it. I thought I was going to faint. And her boyfriend, Bobby, laughed. But then her smile at this memory fades away. She says, but it wasn't just one. I had more with Bobby, and I finished them too. Finally, I was buying my own. I was addicted to cigarettes. She says, I don't know when I started smoking every day. Bobby and I broke up before the junior prom. I was pretty upset, and the smoking seemed to help. She held up her cigarette pack and said, Bobby's gone, but I always have these to remember him by. Always. That's a scary word. I've tried to quit 3 times. But the longest I lasted was a week. And she said, when I did some research online, I found that lots of kids like me try to quit, but only about 3% make it, all because of one cigarette. Like I remember we were actually talking about drugs one time, this a few years ago, some years ago now. It's been closer to a decade now. Me and my older sister were talking about drugs. And she has, at this time, she has 4 kids, and at this time, all of them were pretty young. And she told me, she said, like I tell my kids, if you just take one with a lot of drugs, she said, with a lot of drugs, if you just try it one time, you'll be addicted. A lot of people may not think that way with tobacco, but, it's really true with tobacco as well. Start with one, and you get addicted. So thank you so much for being with us here today. Of course, a lot of scientific things there. I know that doesn't necessarily interest a lot of people, but it's good information, though, and some good things to go over. And it's what needs to be discussed, amen, about addictions. And so if we can help you in any way there, just let us know. Email's right there. And, of course, as we've been saying there, we have a free ebook. That was like the first video that we put out here when we did an overview of tobacco, alcohol, and pornography. The information there, we have that in a free ebook. Want a copy of it, just email it. If you want it hard, like I said, if you want a hard copy, give us your mailing address. We'll mail it to you. If you want that in an ebook form, we'll just email you the file in an ebook. But thanks so much there for being with us. Can help you in any way, just let us know. And I will see you next time with our 4th lecture. Let's just take a look here what we're going to be looking at next. I like to give a little bit of the heads up to what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at advertising and smoking. So we're actually going to kind of be looking at maybe some of the dishonesty here about tobacco companies throughout the years. And so look forward to that next time we meet. And so we'll see you then. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, I am Brother Cooper and I love you and I appreciate you. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.